Well, hello, everyone. This is Will, president of the Board Regen Foundation. I'm joined here today by a whole cohort on behalf of this Vivero proposal. I guess the context here is that Regen Foundation had put out a request for proposals regarding the Regen tokenomics, and we've had a few different ideas come in. This is one of them. We just wanted to give the community a thorough walkthrough of the proposal, hear some from the team, and give space to learn more about what's going on here. So I guess I'll hand it over to you, Todd.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Todd Youngblood. I'm the technology and design steward for Vivero. I will be acting as a facilitator for our group today. Each one of us represents members at the Earth Regenerators, and we are a cohort that put together a technology app and a concept called Vivero. So that is what we're going to be presenting today, and our proposal to the Regen community. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yep.
You can walk through the slides. Great. All right. So I'll start off with Vivero. We are a voluntary kind of working group. Again, like I mentioned, we are all members of the Earth Regenerators community. We all care for Earth and are interested in building solutions that allow us to practice Earth stewardship. Before we jump into introductions, kind of setting some context for Vivero as an app and a space. Vivero is a Spanish word meaning alive, and it's used for nurseries where seeds, sprouts, and saplings are nurtured until they're ready for planting. Metaphorically, we kind of use the Vivero name as a way and a moniker to describe the communities that are emergent within the Earth Regenerators, where we can steward ideas, stories, and in our kind of shared visions. So Vivero is a space where inspiration grows. So I'm going to let the team introduce themselves, and we're going to go counterclockwise, starting with Rachel.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Olson, and I am one of the original members of Earth Regenerators, and I've been part of that organization in various permutations for it's been over 3 years now. It's hard to believe, but it's true. I am also an interfaith minister. I am a writer and an author. And on top of that, I am also a nonprofit development and fundraising professional. So I think you can see it when you kind of put all those things together, how I might have ended up in this space. So that tells you a little bit about me, and I will pass it now to Mitty.
Thanks, Rachel. Well, I'm a polyglot global nomad. I've consulted to chief executives and corporate teams of multinationals. I've worked with Rwandan AIDS orphans and genocide widows, setting up cooperatives and community support structures. I've worked in Kenya in the townships. I've worked in South Africa during the years to majority rule. And what I've learned is that power and position don't bear a light to the strength of community. And that's what brought me into Earth Regenerators and why I'm sticking around in Earth Regenerators and loving the work with Vivero. So I'll pass on to you, Kath.
What about Jonathan?
I was going anti-clockwise, Kath.
We can pass it to Jonathan. He's next on that.
Okay.
And I don't know what's clockwise and anti-clockwise. Forgive me.
Okay.
I'm one of the original disruptors of order.
Love it.
Great. Well, I'm Jonathan Cloud, and I'm one of the co-founders of a nonprofit called Possible Planet, which is the fiscal host and fiscal sponsor for Earth Regenerators, as well as for several other initiatives related to Earth Regenerators, including Barichara Ecoversity and the Design School. Our nonprofit has a number of projects both locally and globally. My background is a long background in social entrepreneurship and an interest in complementary currencies. And I spent several years working with Delton Chen, the author of the Global Carbon Reward Program, which you might be familiar with. So that's what brings me to Earth Regenerators, having discovered Joe Brewer's writings and having gotten involved with the community and agreed to take on the responsibility for the legal and financial aspects of it as the U.S. fiscal sponsor. And I'll pass it back to Todd.
And I'll pass it to Cap.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah.
Thank you, Reedy. Thank you, Jonathan and Rachel. Thanks for having us, Will, and for giving the space for us to share what we are holding with Vivero. So yeah, I'm Cass. I'm joining from Germany. For the last 7 years, I've been in my other home, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I just arrived here back home in Germany, and I'm still settling in. I think it was about 2 years ago when I joined Earth Regenerators with the learning journey into regenerative finance. And before that, in the so-called extractive economy or modernity, I've been a marketing professional for most of my career. And I somehow took bits and pieces of marketing with me into Earth Regenerators, as in rather unconsciously, I've been harvesting wisdom and storytelling from our evolutionary journeys across the different groups, across the different self-governed groups that have been emerging, I guess, over the past 2 to 3 years. And I'm signed up here for the community steward, I guess, for a very good reason, because what is closest to my heart is that everyone knows what's happening. Transparency and justice is closest to my heart. And I know in this, I guess, distributed new environment where you don't have per se one leader, but we are trying to be self-governed, that information is key. And so that is the closest to my heart is transparency and justice. And I guess that brings us right into the community. Over to you, Todd.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, so my name is Todd Youngblood. I'm calling in today from Denver, Colorado. It's a very snowy day. Like I mentioned, I'm the technology and design steward for Vivero. I joined the Earth Regenerators community, I would say, in early 2021, though I wasn't active too much until kind of early mid last year. I have a background in financial services and information technology. I have an undergraduate and graduate degree in information technology, and my interest is in peer-to-peer finance. So I've been exploring blockchain and crypto and kind of what I would call emergent financial technologies that propose a new way of relating to one another and could lead to new forms of economic organization. So I will leave my introduction there, and we can move into kind of the starting vision of Vivero with Rachel.
Well, thank you, Todd, and it is wonderful to be here. And I will say that I am speaking to you today from Barichara, Colombia, where it is. I'm sorry to say this, but it is beautiful and sunny. So I'm definitely the most analog member of this group, I think, and my my contribution to Vivero is really, I guess, the beginning of the story. The idea for Vivero came to me, I think it was about a year ago, because prior to that, I had received a gift from a fund that had been started within Earth Regenerators. Some small donations had come in, and there was enough of a fund put together that a group of us were invited to get together and figure out what we wanted to do with that money, how we wanted to spend it, because we didn't want to hang on to it. And there were no restrictions. And so I was very fortunate to have received a gift out of that fund that allowed me to come from Wisconsin in the US to here in Barichara to have an opportunity to experience some of the really groundbreaking and inspiring regenerative projects that have taken root and are growing here. And that experience was so life-changing for me and so inspiring to me that when I was finished with that, I had a very profound sense that I needed to pay it forward. I needed to find a way to, using the skills that I had in fundraising and in community building and in weaving among different people, to make it possible for other people to also have similar experiences, to refill that fund so that other people could have what I had had. And so out of that, it occurred to me that Earth Regenerators, as I knew it, did not have a lot of people with deep pockets, but it was growing very rapidly. When I started, there were just a handful of people. And by the last year, there were, I don't know, well over 3,000. And so I thought, well, we may not be able to get one or two big gifts, but we could get a whole bunch of small gifts. If everybody could see the value in this, if we could tell the story in such a way that it would invite people in to be part of this idea, that we could help fund each other, that we could help fund people and projects and programs that would, change people's lives, inspire them, and create new opportunities. So with that, I wrote a little paper that explained what I saw as kind of a modified crowdfunding strategy that would not only raise money, but also invite people to make connections with each other and share ideas and grow in relationship. And once I had completed that, I turned it over to my colleagues here. And as I like to think, Vivero took its name seriously because it really did take on a life of its own. It began to grow in ways that I never would have envisioned because of the gifts and the talents and the visions of people who could see even beyond my small little offering. And so it has gone on to do that. And I think I will hand it back to Todd and let others continue the story.
Thanks, Rachel. That was great. All right. So I'm going to provide a little bit more context about the Earth Regenerators community and kind of what led to Rachel's experience of kind of giving. So Earth Regenerators community started, I think it was late 2020. I want to say December 2020, right in the midst of kind of the onset of the pandemic. Rachel, you're shaking your head, so maybe you can correct me.
It was the end of 2019, actually. I met Joe in the fall, late fall of 2019, and by December he was talking about his book. So that's really, okay, to my knowledge, that's sort of the very beginning. But I don't even think we were called Earth Regenerators then. We were just people who were interested in what Joe Brewer was doing.
Okay, yeah, I think that lines up right with the pandemic narrative too. So we began kind of right before the pandemic. Again, started as a study group looking at Joe's book, the Design Institute for Regenerating Earth, the Design Pathway for Regenerating Earth. And Joe, through the Earth Regenerators Mighty Networks, hosted what he called learning journeys, and a series of learning journeys that brought people together into different discussions. So we've kind of grown from a study group to what I would call kind of an autonomous, decentralized organization that's focused on different aspects of Earth stewardship and land care. All of us are kind of distributed geographically and all represent different bioregions. Bioregions are kind of our focal point in the way we like to speak to our place in Earth. So this visual represents kind of the virtual bioregion that is the Earth Regenerators Mighty Network and communities. We have what I call narrative landscapes, so recurring conversations that people are welcome and invited into. We have participatory events that again are kind of open to the community to join and participate in. And this group, the Earth Regenerators Fund group and the Vivero working groups, I would say are at an intersection of those discussions and events where we're hoping to kind of steward and build technology that allows us to more deeply engage in Earth stewardship and coordinate in a virtual space around our kind of place-based activities. We've grown quite a bit since our start. Currently, according to Mighty Networks, we're at over 4,500 registrants on the Mighty Networks, and we have about 100 to 400 monthly active participants in the Earth Regenerators community, though some are more active than others. So it's a good mix. And I will pass it on to Mitty to talk about our timeline. And I will apologize this morning. Miro, our whiteboard tool, is giving us some bugs. There's a design issue, so we lost our background on this one. But I'll pass it to Mitty. I'll pass it to Mitty to walk through the timeline and the creation of the Earth Regenerators Fund and Vivero as a tool.
Well, it's quite appropriate because I think my job is to put in the background that has been lost. So yes, well, I joined Earth Regenerators as probably its second cohort, relatively early in 2020, after the first group had been through a learning journey with Joe around his book, Pathway for Regenerating Earth. And I became really closely involved in an active working capacity when Joe invited a bunch of us, in fact, the whole community, anyone who wanted to come, to a meeting in October 2021, saying, let's set up an Earth Regenerators Fund. Let's not just talk about how to regenerate finance. Let's actually set up our own fund and learn by doing. And that's exactly what we did. We had a couple of groups to begin with, and after several months, Joe split out to focus in one group on creating the Bharachara Fund, and the rest of us were concerned with establishing the governance structure and practicing fund distributing. And so the whole of the early part of 2021, late 2021 into the spring of 2022 was dedicated to governance structure and how do we make the governance structure work while we're still in the process of building it. The traditional challenge for any emergent organization. Well, we distributed the funds, and as Rachel said, she was our very first beneficiary. And did we get an unexpected harvest from Rachel? Because in April, she presented her proposal. And then very quickly, she started talking with Todd Youngblood. And suddenly we had this amazing double helix of a disruptive technology with Rachel's inspiration and Todd's ingenuity coming together to create the being, and it's a living being. So I look at him and her as the sort of birth mother and father of this creature, which has a life of its own and is a very busy infant. We were excited, a group of us gathered around Todd and Rachel, and we put in between July, when we first met as a working group, and the end of the year in December, when we launched the beta version, we were putting in over a couple of 100 hours a month as a volunteer group. And that in the context of an Earth Regenerator Network, which is running other types of activity like the Regenerative Project Incubator, which is an integral part for discovering what projects are going on in the field, and the Bioregional Catalyst Group, which is essentially about helping people to focus in their own bioregion. So we're probably talking 1,000 hours a month of volunteer activity in the whole network. And we are now in the stage where we have learned through our first activity of fund distribution. We've learned some of what works and some of what doesn't work. Last month, we actually activated our Lumio discussion decision-making platform, which enables us to involve not just the members of the ER fund group, which is 14 or 9 people, but the whole of the community who gets involved in Vivero. And the call for the next round will go out, we anticipate, in 2 weeks' time, less than 2 weeks now. And we will be inviting the whole of the Vivero Lumio community to actually get involved in asking questions of applicants and making the decision where the funds go. So we're at an extraordinarily valuable stage in terms of opening out to the wider community, and indeed opening out beyond Earth Regenerators to invite anybody with a regenerative project anywhere that needs support to come and talk with us. So at this point, I'm going to pass to Kath, who is going to share with us some of the kinds of projects that we've actually been supporting to date and learning from as we go. Thanks, Kath.
And I will note too, as Kath takes the microphone, that these are beneficiaries that received funding alongside Rachel in the early stages. So we're in the process of building a relationship and also telling their story and building Vivero as a way to continue to tell the story of these groups. Go ahead, Kath.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Mehdi. Yeah, I want to talk a bit about the beneficiaries. And I think I want to start by saying that we have beneficiaries and contributors in Vivero. So there's a clear distinction for us, and it took us a wee while to get that, I guess, understanding and distinction. And what we see as contributor, this is where I want to start maybe, are people who either financially contribute to Vivero or with non-financial resources. And they are the people who are able to decide who becomes a beneficiary and how much funds are going to be allocated to that beneficiary. What was very, very close to my heart in this development was that non-financial contributors are equally eligible, so to say, to have a voice in deciding who becomes a beneficiary and how much funds are being allocated to them. Those 4 beneficiaries you see here on the slides, the Regenerators Collective, the Tribes and Nature Defenders in the Philippines, Plethora Social Initiative in Uganda, and the Bioregional Regeneration Fund are not only, I guess, the first great partners and projects we have been able to support initially through the Earth Regenerator Fund. And we have learned to, what does it take to support a refugee-led community project in Uganda? What does it take to distribute not only money to them or to do a money transaction to them, but also to support them in many other ways. And I think what we have learned with these 4 projects and partners is that there's no one solution that fits it all. Of course, initially, we all, especially, I guess, beneficiaries, when they put out a, a proposal submission or an application to receive funding, what is on top of our head is usually money. But then when we are able to dig deeper with the social ledger that Vivero is offering, we fairly easily can uncover other needs that can be met through the community. And this is where I'm getting like most excited about, as in, how can we help those projects beyond their financial needs? How can we, as a community, to support them to do the work on the ground with non-financial resources? And I think this is where we are starting to tap into some really, really exciting experiments and explorations with Vivero, where we really explore a multi-capital approach, as in how can we account for value that is beyond financial contribution? How can we account for, let's say, a story that I'm going to publish for our wonderful people on the Osa Peninsula? How is this going to be valued? And I'm like most excited about those conversations. We have been able to support all 4 projects you can see here on the slide in so many and diverse ways, where it was even in the beginning extremely challenging to put that into words. And sometimes it is even just, like being present and listening. And how do we value being present and listening? And yeah, those are the questions I'm most excited about as a community steward here. And I'm looking forward to, in particular, support not only those 4 projects, hopefully with the next round, but even some similar amazing projects like we see here. I hope I covered everything. Thank you, Todd. I think I'm handing it over to Jonathan.
Yeah, you sure.
Well, thank you. That was really a great overview so far of where we are with Vivero and with the real substance of what we're doing. My role is more of a formal one, in that we manage the centralized aspects of Vivero as compared to the decentralized aspects, and really just providing a foundation through our 501c3 to act as a trustee for the funds that are raised and distribute them as directed by the ER Fund Group. And we have a number of structures in place to make sure that we're tracking together the funds that are coming in and going out. And we have an accounting angel who works with us and makes sure that we're on top of all of the different ways in which funds are coming in, because funds are actually coming in through different platforms and portals. And we're combining both fiat currency and cryptocurrency in the fund. My my role is a bit more active than that of a typical fiscal sponsor, where we don't exist at a distance from the project, but I'm directly involved in it, and simply step aside where there's some issue that would involve us as the responsible actor for the Vivero program. So that's what I have to say about this. We have been talking about multi-value accounting, and I think making some progress in understanding what we consider a contributor to be outside of the question of financial contribution. And and I'm actively involved in some other aspects of the work of the Earth Regenerators and of the design school. So we're keeping on top of all of the really expanding relationships that we're building, of which Vivero is a kind of a core component. And happy to answer any other questions about this if people have them. Back to you, Todd.
Thanks, Jonathan. All right, so we progressed kind of from like storytelling into context of the Earth Regenerators community, some of the relationships that we built, and kind of the seed of our kind of legal structure. So I'm going to move into some of the more kind of complex and technical nuances of the fund and our different kind of perspectives of our structure. So like Mitty mentioned, the Earth Regenerators Fund kind of emerged out of discussion around how do we collectively build a common pool of resources that we can share and distribute within the network. So this slide is kind of representative of our first structure in our operating structure, where the Earth Regenerators Fund is designed to raise money as a group to enable some level of participatory budgeting and determination as to where those funds go, and directly funding stewardship in landscapes and fellowships as well. Rachel being our first fellow. And then on top of that, we built the Vivero application as an interface for interacting with the Earth Regenerators Fund. The Vivero app is kind of what I like to call the participatory giving trust. It's an interface that we're hoping to generalize and offer to other communities that want to do some level of participatory grant making and giving as well. So Vivero, as a technology and as an app, a web and mobile application, offers some level of engagement in accounting, reviewing trust statements. There's a calendar and event schedule, a community note board that allows some like social features, and a resource library for the community to curate interesting articles, websites, documents. So we have kind of going into a little bit more complexity, our trust structure. This is what I like to call kind of the living structure that Mitty alluded to. I like to think that Rachel discovered the Vivero as a living space, and I came in, maybe did some decoration, made it look pretty, and we collectively kind of brought life to that living space. But Vivero in the Earth Regenerators Fund is built to resemble an endowment structure, which is a fairly common, I would say, investment or stewardship structure that holds investments that grow and return value to the principal and to the fund. So what we're doing that's different from a typical endowment fund is we give our contributors, again, financial and non-financial contributors, a say in identifying and surfacing potential beneficiaries, and helping categorize the fund and prioritize specific purposes or categories of the fund that we call focuses. So that participatory approach gives everybody and offers everybody in the Earth Regenerators community an equal say. We're exploring some pretty novel and innovative, like I would say, governance and voting features, like liquid democracy and dot voting. So during our next call for giving, we're going to be leveraging those tools to help us determine how to distribute the funds that we've raised over the past few months across our portfolio of beneficiaries, based on community voice and granting everybody kind of an equal voice in how those funds are distributed. And all of that allows us to help further bioregional stewardship. So going again into more kind of level of complexity, I have what I'm calling our treasury structure, which is kind of the first structure that identifies how we relate to the Regen network. So like I mentioned, we have an endowment. An endowment is a part of our fund that is allocated toward digital assets that are reconciled to the blockchain. That endowment, over time, funds our giving balance. And currently we are acting as, we have a community stake of the Regen token, using Loa Labs as our validator. And we have a stewardship process where we manually harvest. We call harvest our stake. We accept our stake, and then we restake it And that can allow us to kind of grow the fund over time. We also have retired an eco credit. Looks like I did that on March 14th. So integrating the eco asset model into Vivero, I think, is an interesting concept, because there have been long-term visions and discussions around what carbon currency and what complementary currencies could look like in the Vivero ecosystem. We're also integrating with the Ethereum network, specifically the Give project on the Gnosis chain. We also have a staking position with Give, and that also allows us to kind of build a regenerative investment vehicle and support more giving related activities. Giveth is very similar to GoFundMe, but they have a fairly good representation of, I would say, Earth stewardship, eco-village type models that are using Giveth to support themselves and find some level of external financing outside of the traditional fiat world. So these two community stakes are what I consider our trust, and they are held collectively via different digital wallets. We're actively working to set up kind of a multi-signature system that allows multiple members of the ER fund group and specifically our accounting angel to be able to access those wallets in a way that allows us to kind of maintain some level of security and privacy. So yeah, to protect those resources that we've gathered collectively. And so that kind of represents where we are now. We have a web application that integrates crypto and the endowment as a community staking position. The app, like I mentioned, has a mix of social features that allow us to kind of communicate and coordinate as a virtual community. It also has those financial features that allow participants in the app or guests to contribute to the fund via the 501c3. And we're hoping with our asks to the Grant Foundation, or sorry, Regen Foundation and Regen Development Incorporated, to help further our technology and our vision. So some of those kind of aspirations that we have include building out a peer-to-peer system where members within Vivero can branch a Vivero app to represent specific bioregions. On the first branch, that is what I would call the creation of the Vivero Commons, which would entail that Vivero branches could start to communicate with each other. So they could post kind of network notes or requests between branches or nodes. We also have another aspiration of creating more of an interoperable ecosystem at the technical level. That could include integrating elements of the Regen network upgrade, the 2.0, and then the Cosmos system 5.0. I think given that we're operating kind of as a collective multi-party treasury, I think it would be interesting to explore use cases and how we could integrate some of the governance modules. We're also looking at creating an API that could allow us to integrate with other technologies on the web, allowing tech to read and write to the Vivero database or interact with the Vivero application. And then we're also looking at ways to create more, I would say, accountability and reporting for the trust that is Vivero. So my technical side wants to call that state management, where we could host an XML file that represents the changing and evolving state of the application and the fund. Another aspiration that we have is creating a high fidelity dashboard that allows us to kind of move forward on our commitments to transparency and accountability to the Earth Regenerators community. And finally, again, mentioned a little bit earlier that we believe what we're building here is fairly valuable technology and could be applied to other communities that want to engage in participatory giving or grant making. So we would also love to document and define the Vivero blueprints and create a forkable or branchable technology that could be offered as a service to other members of nonprofits or other social organizations that would like to use a participatory giving structure. So that ideally would be licensed under the Creative Commons and be done in the spirit of open source technology and software. So I'm going to leave it there. We just hit the 30-minute mark. But on behalf of the Earth Regenerators community and those of us present, thank you for your time. We are not just making an ask to the Regen Foundation and Regen Network Development Incorporated, but rather making more of an open ask. If you're interested in participating in Vivero, we ask that you sign up. You're welcome to join the Earth Regenerators community, and we have a few different ways to allow contributors to help support financially as well, either via fiat currency or crypto. So I will leave it there and open up the door to Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Todd, and thank you, Rachel, Kath, Jonathan, Mitty. It's a great presentation. Well, maybe the first thing I would ask would just be, this was a tokenomics RFP, and just wondering where you see the Regen token tying in here, and where you could see an evolution of the Regen token that kind of dovetails with the vision that you're building here.
Yeah. So in the Regen RFP, there were a few kind of potential considerations that I think R&D Inc. and the Regen Foundation proposed. I would say our concept revolves mostly around that eco asset treasury model. So that in my mind, our trust mechanism that we've set up is representative of an eco asset treasury. We are active participants in staking the Regen token. We could also explore things like being a liquidity provider for the Regen token. I think it's really interesting looking at how we could be a source of demand for purchasing and retiring the eco credits. I would say it's not outside of our kind of mission and vision to support multiple kinds of Earth stewardship, and I would say supporting restoration-based kind of carbon credits would be included in that. I think some members of the working group, like Jonathan, are interested and excited about the city forest credits model. And I would even say that there could be a future in which Vivero Trust could be branched and could be a treasury system to collateralize eco assets for the issuance of a carbon currency. So that's kind of my touch points on kind of Vivero and the token economic system. But I think with where we're positioning ourselves now and how we're working to integrate crypto, blockchain, and maybe Web3 more generally, we could be a fairly strong contributor and participant in the Regen network. And I would hope to see a future where some of our bioregional projects are actually able to work with Regen and work to issue our own eco assets or eco credits on the Regen chain as well.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Would some of these projects you fund develop their own methodologies that list on the registry? And it sounds like that could definitely be something that happens. And then in turn, those eco credits could be a revenue stream for your trust here.
Yeah, yeah. Generally, we're thinking of Web3 and blockchain kind of like a non-market perspective. Like we really try to embrace the spirit of the commons, or public goods, I think is another way that it's talked about in the Web3 space. But how do we organize our financial relationships in such a way where we're not trying to buy and sell eco credits, but rather like we recognize the value, and I'm speaking for myself, kind of maybe with a little bit more in-depth perspective on eco credits and carbon credits in the model, but we know the value of purchasing and retiring eco credits because of when you care for Earth, Earth cares back. Some economists call that ecosystem services, but that's really the relationship we're trying to build and foster. And I'm sure other people have something else to say on that too.
I'm happy to speak to that. Thank you, Todd. I think what I'm most excited about at the moment is that we would open, I guess, Regen tokens up to maybe audiences that haven't been in touch with you yet. When I think about the tribes and nature defenders in the Philippines, who is one of our beneficiaries, it would be a huge value for them to, I guess, break through the extractive economies that are in at the moment and actually have another, I guess, revenue and contribution stream. And so I know that onboarding them as an indigenous tribe in the Philippines is maybe a long way to go. But yeah, if we are able to go that together, I know in my heart that this will have a long-standing value, more than $250 being sent over or whatever, but actually building those long established relationships with people who care at least as much about nature as we do, and are on the ground every day and defend the forest that is being threatened by the capitalistic system, and getting them out of the capitalistic system into, I guess, new ways of sustaining themselves is what is closest to my heart. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
So I come to this from the very far onto the human and human interaction scale. And one of the things that I've seen as I'm preparing to go back to the United States and preparing to be involved in an on the ground landscape level starting of an organization that wants to promote pro-social engagement, wants to promote bioregionalism as a new paradigm. And we have people in our group who are very actively involved in Web3, but what we are finding is in the Midwest of the United States, in rural areas, just the word cryptocurrency is not well received. It is not, it's not a comfortable place. There's a lot of poor information or no information. And what I see this as being is perhaps a tool for teaching, building trust through existing person-to-person relationships that allows folks to begin to enter into this world in a way that feels safe, in a way where they are in a non-threatening way. We've actually been having conversations about, as we begin to educate people on what is bioregionalism, why does it matter, why is it something that A, we may already be doing and not knowing it, and B, this is the direction we think is most sustainable and resilient for the future, and that Web3 has an important role to play in that we can include that in our educational curriculum programming, and that the Vivero could be a very accessible kind of teaching tool and bridge for that. So I would just put that into the mix as something that I would like to see be considered as we go forward.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Um,
Can I touch on that too?
yeah,
One of the narratives that I think I've been trying to champion kind of in the Web3 space is how do we deconstruct our technical abstractions so that just like people can understand the technology. And I think Vivero does this pretty well, because you can, through Vivero, and we've called Vivero kind of a Web 2 to Web 3 bridge, because Vivero, the application, is very, very much kind of a Web 2 solution, but it actually integrates kind of the token economics of Web 3 on the endowment side of things. So we're hoping to kind of expand the audience to Web 3 by giving them a way to contribute fiat currency into a trust system. But on the back end, we can, through contributor consent, allow them to expose or allocate some of their contribution to the long-term capacity building, which means that we can redirect some of that fiat currency into a regen staking position that's committed to the trust for a period of time or indefinitely, and that can kind of grow our regenerative capacity. And the same is true with Giveth and Giving. I see them as kind of playing well together, and we've spoken in the past about kind of the role that tokens can play and cryptocurrencies can play in growing the fund and growing our giving balance or our capacity for giving.
yeah, go ahead, Minnie.
So actually, you came in with the question of regen tokens. I think the most important thing, bar none, is that if regen tokens come our way, we actually have a relationship with the people of regen. It's relationship, relationship, relationship. And you've got things to teach us, and we've got things to learn and to teach the wider community.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess my maybe just one last question before we wrap up here is what does the decision-making process look like for allocating those funds? You had mentioned certainly the Earth Regenerator community as a whole is very large. What's the intention for Vivero you mentioned these 4 projects that have already, you've distributed some funding. How do you see that process moving forward of kind of decision making around who gets funding?
This one's Mitty. Yeah, she's been very involved in developing that process.
We're right at the beginning, Will. We're still involving. We've grown from a decision-making group of 14 out into the next layer will be probably a decision-making group of about 40 or 50. And we're learning. One of the things we're needing to learn is how do we actually assess the project? How do we assess the people that put themselves up for receiving gifting? And the answer is that we have to develop the answers. And that's one of the places where I think Regen can be so focused and helpful, because one of the things I've really heard as the message coming from Regen is we want to measure, we want to assess, we want criteria that we can actually name and be agreed about. So that's the kind of place where I would value the dialogue between our organizations.
Yeah, and I will say too that we do have some fairly specific kind of organizational structures, even though we are a pretty fluid, emergent ecosystem. The ER Fund group, which we also refer to as kind of the governance council, is a participatory group with a regular meeting schedule currently happening bi-weekly on Friday mornings, America's time, and we welcome voices into that space. It's I wouldn't say advertised, but it is an open access kind of participatory structure. We also have our working groups, kind of the many of us here on this call are members of or stewards of those working groups. We're the ones kind of holding that space and holding and building the technology. But they're also kind of participatory. They're not advertised as being open, but we welcome voices in those spaces as well. So our current kind of application process includes kind of more formal governance where the ER fund puts out a call. That call will also be published in Vivero, and it will be contributors, financial and non-financial contributors to Vivero, who will be invited into a Lumio decision-making. That's kind of our DAO-like decision-making and deliberation process. We'll use a dot voting system. And those dots will be distributed across kind of the list of beneficiaries, and it will be the summation of that dot vote that helps kind of fluidly determine the flow of funding to beneficiaries. And it's our goal to work into kind of a cadence where we're submitting that call for applications every solstice and equinox, following kind of natural patterns, where we're distributing gifts, equinox and solstice events, through that kind of participatory and open process. And I think maybe it's once that process is more fully developed that we could start to think about how do we integrate some of those governance functions, like the on-chain Regen network governance functions, where our trusts or branch of trust can be multi-party actors who are interacting on-chain and off-chain and bringing proposals and ideas.
Yeah. Well, I think we're getting to a point here where I should wrap the recording, and thank you all for your presentation. So yeah, I guess we'll pause that for now.